Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are excited to engage in our latest Fireside Chat. Our theme today is all about automation as it relates to the intersection of supply chain operations and automation in commercial real estate. I'm really excited to be joined today by two industry experts in the field, Rob Abramovitch and Nick Gaganiaras, and I wanted to give opportunity to each of them to provide an introduction. Rob, as sales and marketing from Mainway Handling, welcome and thank you for your time today. I wanted to give you an opportunity, a few minutes to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for inviting me here. Happy to be here. So my name is Rob Abramovitch. I've been with Mainway for half a dozen years. And the first time I saw my first automatic storage and retrieval system was about 38 years ago at Bauer, a skate manufacturing plant. Anyways, so I love automation. I actually think we ought to spell automation O-U-G-H-T and not A-U-T-O, but that's just a personal feeling. And the more that we can treat this as an evolution rather than a revolution, the better off we'll be. So that's a little bit about me and how I think about things.
Excellent. Thank you. Great concept of continual progress. I'm Nick, who's Vice President of Supply Chain Solutions at NLS, or National Logistics Services.
Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about supply chain, similar to Rob. Been in the industry many years and very passionate, and consider myself a little bit of a warehouse geek. I've been with NLS for just over 4 years now, and focused on the automation, our real estate strategy, and the engineering and solutions work. But I've have about 20 years experience in the 3PL sector, working with regional, domestic Canadian, as well as global international 3PLs in both operations, transportation, and supply chain solutions. I did have a little stint. I got out of the industry. Not many of us do, but I got out to spend a little time at Colliers, where I brought my supply chain experience and talked a lot with the brokerage community and the landlord community about how supply chain strategy intersects with the real estate decision-making process. But a few years back, I felt the swan song and I was lulled back into the 3PL sector. I enjoyed talking about things, but I really missed the doing. So I had the opportunity to join a great team here at NLS, and we are in the midst of an automation journey and a transformation journey, and it's a very exciting time. And again, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you and your audience.
Outstanding. Again, thank you to you both. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think there is such an overlap between supply chain process, innovation, technology, and making sure that that is working for an organization as it relates to their commercial real estate decision, either today or future planning down the road. I think they're both interdependent in terms of the real estate decision can be better informed by having a greater handle on the supply chain operations. But so too, I think there's a big trend out there when you look at the whole situation with tariffs, with just expenses in general, and rising vacancy like costs, but also being asked to do more with less seems to be a trend amongst our client base. And so I'm really excited and curious to hear your perspectives on all these fronts. So we're going to dive into our first question, and this one is actually geared for you, Rob. I'm curious in terms of your views on the progression of AMR, AGVs, cobots, and robotic unloading. Now, for our audience who may not be familiar with some of these terms and acronyms, I'm looking forward for you to unpack those, but curious to understand how this has evolved over time and what is yet to come.
So any work that human beings do that we don't like to do, we try and find things around, workarounds for that. For the value add, warehousing is always trying to have less touches, less handling in the material handling business, as it were. So you mentioned a few things that are really interesting. Automated container or truck unloading is a really big deal. We get C-cans from afar. They're packed, not on pallets. They're floor loaded. And so guys like Pickle Robot and others have tried to tackle the task of unloading, like automating that unload. And so I feel like that has been a topic for 7 to 10 years, and we're still at a point where it doesn't really pay for itself because the alternative is paying someone to do it for you, and that's a pretty low threshold, right? It's a very inexpensive cart and doesn't really add a lot of value, really. It just adds handling. So there's also cardboard on demand, which I'm a really big fan of. Folks like CBP and Pack Size have these great package on carton cardboard on demand, and it right sizes the package. As a lot of you may have had this happen to you, you order something small, it comes in a massive box with all kinds of dunnage and extra, packing materials. Have you ever had that happen to you?
Absolutely. When you think of that ecological footprint that comes with the massive box, and yes.
Well, it's also the cost too, because you pay on the cube, you pay on the weight, and if you have to pay for dunnage, you had to pay for the dunnage to put inside the box. Like, that's a really big, heavy lift that's the cardboard on demand does. So I think that's here. That makes a lot of sense. That's present, and you should, if you haven't looked into it yet, that's something that everybody should look at and consider. Printing on boxes, every shipping label, 4x6 label gets printed, puts on a box, and we don't send our kids to school to learn how to put stickers on boxes, right, Nick? I mean, that's not really a happy thing, right?
I don't know. That was my favorite part about elementary school is the sticker books. So that's why I enjoy the logistics space so much. I just, me and stickers get along.
For you, gold star for you.
It's interesting. Like, Rob, you talk about two different aspects, right? And how it kind of links in with the AMRs and cobots and the robotic unloading, I think, is a little bit of an offshoot. But one thing that AMRs, AGVs, cobots have in similarity is that the natural fact is that in order for a warehouse to store product, you have to have space.
Yeah.
Until we explore the physics and learn to manage and contain a black hole, that will be the ultimate warehouse, because the truck backs up and it just goes into nothing. But the reality is that you have to have shelving, you have to have space, you have to have product, and therefore that means distance. And you're either in the warehouse, you're doing one of two things: you're traveling to, or you're doing.
Right.
So in our world, I look at two different factors. One is I'm trying to replicate hands, and I'm trying to replicate feet. Mm-hmm. The industry and automation has done a really good job of replicating feet. We've had the wheel around for thousands of years. We've optimized it to a point that we can replace a human walking very efficiently, very effectively at a very low cost, whether it's conveyance, whether it's AMRs, whether it's a cobot that's working and walking alongside a person. That technology is simple because we're just moving in a dimension. The challenge is that the hands, these are still incredibly expensive to replicate. As you deal with in the warehouse, in the real estate world, in manufacturing, you have controlled points, you have controlled inputs and outputs because you're moving product through a known sequence. In a distribution world, you're doing the same thing, but the product changes and the destination and the inputs change as well, because today, Susan is ordering one product, and then tomorrow Tom is ordering the next product, and it's going to other parts of the country, which is a mathematical excitement. We can optimize those numbers. Sure. But you can optimize what you know, you can't optimize what you don't know. So we design and bringing together the real estate and the automation and the human factors. And this is where AMRs and AGVs and cobots has been really interesting, is that we've evolved and now they are accepted, and we see the benefit in the use cases in distribution where we can start to control the inputs and outputs. So I can have a known path or a known movement within the warehouse. So it's very exciting to see those technologies continue to evolve and also give companies a level one kind of step into automation. I don't have to fully automate. I can bring a cobot with me and I can do those they're fairly inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. So it allows an organization to naturally evolve rather than revolutionize. Like Rob, you mentioned it. You auto automate. It's a great thing. And this gives people a little bit of a low risk journey to get in there. And I think that's the interesting one, is that allows, whether you're in 20,000 square feet or you're in 400,000 square feet, there are opportunities for automating, and these AMRs give you use case for many different size footprints.
Say inside the fulfillment space, there's two functions that are being automated really successfully right now. One is the pick. So you have goods to person automation, that's AGVs and AMRs and all kinds of, product presenting automation. And then you have sort, right? So sortation is used inside of a picking facility, but it's also used in the final mile where, they have to get it out to the pickup and delivery vehicles. There might be 80 of them in a sortation center. And so those two pieces are really tried, tested, and true. And then you have a couple of things that are bolt-ons onto that, automatic packaging and automatic printing and applying. That's the kind of things, those are the kinds of things that people are doing as an easy, step in. But the first thing that has to happen is you have to have good data, right? You kind of invented a word. It's called dedicated. You need to be dedicated to data. And without data, everything is garbage, right? I can't do anything for you. I can't help you. The assumptions that I'm going to make are just assumptions, and that's terrible. I would rather have data. If I start from a point of data, then I can really build, within phases to excellence, right? And assuredness. For me, the level of automation in a warehouse, begins with data. And before you do any of those things, of course, all the simple things that you can do in the warehouse ought to be done. My favorite thing for safety is to delineate traffic between pedestrians and automation. So forklifts should not be in the same place where people are walking and picking. And if you can do that, that's great. It's a really simple way of keeping people safe. And safety is really important in the workplace. And to be able to work in a place where it's free from garbage and debris, pallets shed and pieces of plastic kind of strewn about will lead to people tripping and having very bad feelings about where they work. So things like just, being a good housekeeper are really important. And I know we're talking about automation, but sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference. I've been in over 3,000 different warehouses and manufacturing plants in my time in the world, and I've seen a big difference between places that run efficiently and don't run efficiently. And there's sort of two things happen at one point. They're very, very efficient places with great KPIs are also very clean and tidy, and they have a well thought through plan. And that's what I like about Nick. He's a builder, he plans, and his facilities are always very well maintained, and the thought that goes into it is obvious.
Thanks for that, Rob, and I appreciate that vote of confidence there. Sarah, I'd love to flip it back to you as well. In your travels and in the various worlds that you go into, again, irrespective of the size of facility, have you seen a common thread of, like what Rob mentioned, of pride of ownership, pride of operation, in terms of how people are getting the most out of their facility? Or is it crammed with product and we're filling every nook and cranny and we're meeting the density side, but without the human factor? What do you think about that world?
I think both of the themes and thoughts that you both shared are very relevant, and I've seen the gamut. I've seen the very precision, organized, meticulous, everything is lined up and assembled just so. And then there's other scenarios, obviously, where it's the client is bursting out of the seams and definitely needs a bigger warehousing facility. And perhaps in that move, using that as an opportunity to go back to foundational principles that Rob alluded to about making sure that this space is organized, notwithstanding just from a safety perspective, but also from efficiency. And that's automation at its core is the physical space, but also to the process behind it. So making sure that everyone within that team understands the process from a business standpoint about how you go through the life cycle of that logistical supply chain, and making sure that it's understood by everyone in that environment, and that it works for the business, and that it can scale as well. So there's a fine balance between having something that's a blueprint, but making sure it's flexible as well, because I know that we have also talked about the world we're living right now. Things are changing so rapidly that you have to be able to design things for flexibility, and they can't be things that are just so permanent. So we're seeing that as well, making sure that they're thoughtful and intentional, but flexible.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you highlight a lot of times when people are at bursting at the seams, it triggers a search, or we just need more space. But taking a step back and understanding how the different groups within the company work together, and stepping back and understanding what is purchasing working towards, what is planning working, and what is the sales function working through. And if there's a misalignment, that could be causing a lot of these constraints and opportunities for reworking not just the space that they're in of design. And there's a lot of opportunities for automation and to streamline and to remove unnecessary handling or duplication of effort. But there's also business process improvements that can be made. And, is the buying team buying based on a quantity and not based on a demand cycle? Are they buying at the right time that maybe they can bring it in earlier so that you can handle it more efficiently without having to rework it or to squeeze it in when the warehouse is already full?
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunities for holistic, and real estate is foundational to every company. We have to exist somewhere. And the industrial space and commercial space that we're in, whether it's an office environment, and we've seen, that's a whole other conversation as organizations grapple with hybrid and back to office versus work from home. And we won't even go into that part of the conversation. But in the warehouse space and in the industrial, whether it's manufacturing or distribution, huge opportunities to make better utilization of the space and to find better ways of operating in there and bringing the teams together. It might be visibility, it might be software process and legacy software that's driving or a certain function in a process. Even vendors and manufacturers, we've always done it this way. It's something that's always there and we just don't consider it. But what if we bought from somewhere else around the world? We can source globally. Does that mean I can change my buying patterns because now product is coming in at a different schedule and frequency, different modes, leveraging railways, leveraging intermodal or truckload and LTL and moving products more efficiently. So I think there's a lot of soul searching that can be done in the real estate decision. And avoiding a knee-jerk reaction of, we need more space and we need it now. If you can put some time and thought to it and clear your desk. I know everyone's living in a right now world, but the opportunity to really put some thought into what you really need and what you're trying to accomplish, because you're locking in for the next 3, 5, 10 years, 20 years. And that's our world. And in the 3PL space as well. I've been thinking about us as more of we are insurance. We're not just a low-cost provider. We are there when volumes go up. We're there when volumes go down, and we are handling everything that gets thrown at us. So, Rob, you mentioned flexibility and variability.
Oh, yeah.
That's the nature of our daily world. And any supply chain decision, whether it's automation or real estate or staffing and bringing the right people in, is all about, do we have the right skill set? Do we have the right tools, the right equipment, and the right places to be able to accommodate what we don't know?
Yes, exactly.
Today's fulfillment process doesn't need to be just flexible. They need to be a contortionist.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it.
Like, you really need to do whatever it takes, because the unboxing experience and the timing of everything keeps getting ratcheted up. We deal with some customers who have value add, where they're refreshing product before it gets sent to the customer. Leather shoes, they get sprayed with a special leather smell to make sure that as somebody unboxes it, it smells like a fine Corinthian leather, right? There's some really goofy stuff happening out there. But no, it's all part of the brand and part of the overall offering, right? So more than ever, you need to be flexible. And I see that happening a lot with cobots, robots, with AGVs and AMRs. I've seen fields where they initially started with one bot, and then they added the Gen 2, and then they went to a different company and bought a different bot. And if the software is good enough, it can actually, with a swarm mentality, control all of the bots inside that field. And so people can bite off exactly what they need to chew at any given time, and they can add to it, which I'm always a big proponent of. Build with the end in mind and build in phases so that it's less expensive One of the things that's, has been really sort of meteoric is the usefulness of the batteries. So the batteries have become much smaller and they're quicker to charge and they last longer. At the same time, the prices come down. The same sort of trend is happening with vision systems. So laser systems and motion and photo capture. The units, I mean, they're all over our cars, right? They're everywhere on people's doorsteps. They're in general public, and we're getting better at recognizing faces and recognizing animals versus people and all that. And so what ends up happening is, because the technology starts off as this garage project that cost $250,000, now it's a 99-cent app. And the next step is it's included free on the chip of the vision system. So as vision systems get better, as mobility gets better, as batteries become less expensive and more useful, they become less expensive, they become more used. And so there's this huge ramp up and ability to help the 3PL help a lot of these processes sort of take up the slack. And we deal with companies like IKEA and Walmart, and they're in a race, and they all have massive steps, different steps of automation. Sure, they're solving the goods to person, they're solving the packaging, they're solving a load, they're solving an unload. All those things have really, really good value. Even handheld devices are amazing. It used to be, if I wanted if Nick asked me for a scanner, a dimensioner, that was a $25,000 piece of equipment. Now I can go and buy one, a handheld unit, for like $1,200 that includes the software, and it works way better than the larger ones used to. Like, all of this gets much, much better, much more useful, and you get better data, right? You get that handheld unit will take a picture, it'll read all the barcodes, it'll do a dimension. You could hook it up to a scale and take the weight of something at the same time. And in the press of a button, inside of a second and a half, you have all that data collected and stored and uploaded. And it is now useful when you do your pick and your ship.
Yeah, no, it's
awesome.
You mentioned, Rob, at the beginning, you mentioned the opportunity to scale and to build with the end in mind, but take baby steps and step by step as you grow into an end solution. I think it really highlights the need to do it with purpose, right? So have the right strategy, take the time to plot out what you're going to accomplish and what you're trying to accomplish, right? At the end of the day, what is the deliverable? What is the end goal? And what is your world operating in? So if you know that there are variabilities planned in, that needs to be taken into account and built into the roadmap. The other part is that there is a lot of new technology, and this is fantastic. And there's a lot of ventures out there trying to solve niche problems that are expanding into bigger industry problems, and creating great opportunities and great solutions. But what we've seen in the migration of industrial robots from the manufacturing line, which was a known in, known out, and controlled point, I moved from this coordinate to this coordinate, and I did the same over and over and over again. And now we've applied that into the distribution and the fulfillment world. But it's taken, on the technology side, we still refer to EDI, and that's been around since the 60s. But our world is so variable that that's the biggest challenge, that we have to design with an eye for what if and what could be, and how it will all fit together. That unknown can't stop us from actually taking a step and doing things, because if you're not, then you're just left competing with labor and competing on flexibility, which, there's a market for that. That market is dwindling. So just because you don't know what it's going to look like doesn't mean you can avoid or put off the decision. You do need to go down the path. I mean, we need to see how these work.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you, Nick. How troublesome or how problematic is the reverse logistics for you guys? Like, how much work is that?
Reverse logistics is the
people return things. I mean, it's just what it is. I buy a small and a medium, and one of them is coming back. It is.
It's coming back, and those that are doing it well don't want to say how well they're doing it. Those that aren't doing it well don't want to say how well they're not doing it. It's a fact of the industry. So We obviously work very closely with our partners. We're working with different technologies on finding and catching the returns further upstream, being able to re-inject them and repurpose them into the supply chain so that they're able to be resold as quickly as possible, and also refurbished or making any changes or catching those that are in the rental world. We'll try and buy and maybe not, but we have to balance all that with the brand experience. We have to balance all that with the technology and make it as efficient as possible, and not collect any backlogs, not have product sitting waiting to be processed. It's critical that we have visibility throughout the process and we get it on the shelf as quickly as possible. So it's a massive area. And, in Canada, we have the geography to deal with without the density. In the US and other parts of the world, and there's a different geography and density trade-off. So you can do things very differently in the return space because it feeds right back into the outbound forward logistics. But here in Canada, we focus on, again, finding the right way to get it back and out of the return stream and into the forward stream as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
All right, so we're on to question number 2. I'm curious to hear from you, Nick. How do you see untapped technology pieces changing the supply chain landscape? I'm curious to hear your perspectives on motorized lift gates, no label printing, cardboard on demand, and automated cardboard openers.
Good question, Sarah. And these are great new applications of technology and automation, but they do have a high degree of standardization requirement, and that's the biggest challenge in our world. I really like the opportunities around no label printing, where we apply the print directly onto the cartons, but we're still challenged with, again, that variability, where if I know I have this amount of space and this position on the corrugate, it works great. But if I change vendors or I change the customer, then I have to work around those variables, and making sure I have that clear visual space for the application. But it's a great next level technology that is simple automation. But the biggest challenge is exploring ways to address what we take for granted, right? We've talked about the human hand-eye coordination. It's incredibly difficult to replicate with machinery. A single task can be automated, but in distribution, there's rarely a single task that consumes a full associate on a daily basis. Manufacturing is another story, and that there are plenty of opportunities, and that's why we've seen the massive expansion and use cases for industrial robots and automation. But the distribution world is now slowly taking advantage of those advances in technologies and solutions, where we've gone from a single gripper or style where robots can now interchange grippers or handle different types of product and packaging. Cardboard on demand is a great opportunity, and we've talked about the opportunity to reduce dimensions and reduce shipping error, and create better safety of product and security within the supply chain. But again, the variability is the biggest challenge, and that's why we haven't pulled the trigger yet on that.
Interesting. And Rod, from your perspective, can you speak to these evolving technologies and demand forecasts across different sized companies? And if you have any relevant kind of case studies that you can share with our audience as well.
Oh boy. Okay, so I love cardboard on demand, but I'll add to that with an automatic bagging machine, because a lot of products, especially in fashion, they'll end up in a poly bag, and the ability to do that work is greatly improved by an auto bagger. So basically, you have a reel of a whole bunch of bags inside of a box, and those bags are fed into a machine. The operator scans an item or an order, and then the bag is printed with the final mile label on it and opened in front of the operator. The operator then puts all the product and paperwork inside the bag and hits a button. It's sealed, it gets sealed, and then conveyed away. And that happens about 5 times faster than you would normally do in that same workstation. So you could either just do that work much faster and go home, or if you had, say, 60 of those workstations, now you only need like 12 of them. So it really changes. And that's one of the things that we did with the folks that are the 3PL for Uggs. So it automatically goes into a bag, and And the bags are sometimes a little bit less expensive to send because they nest better, and they're just treated a little bit differently than a box from a final mile perspective. But yeah, anytime you can do you can do prints, automatic prints and insert, or print and apply. That's a great thing. There's even no label printing, which saves you the cost of the label itself, and you're just basically printing onto a box. But there's limitations, like Nick said, that you need a box that's at least 4 inches high. Otherwise, there's nothing to print on. And it has to be in a box and not a bag. And it has to be a box with 90-degree angles. So there's some if-then statements that you have to adhere to, and there's some places to use it and places not to use it. But I'm also a fan in the reverse logistics of robotic decanting. So imagine, you're dealing with your reverse logistics. You get all kinds of boxes back, and you have to open all these really weird sized boxes. So what do? You hand your operator a knife, and you're asking them to cut open to these boxes. And instead of that, you can put it on a conveyor belt. There's a dimensioning aspect to it. So little eyes on the box dimensions it, and then plans a path for a robotic knife to open up the box. And you can either cut the lid off on four sides and have a gripper take that and put it into a trash, or you could have it zip it open on 3 sides and just open it like a lid, or you could actually do an H pattern on the top because you plan to reuse that box. So there's all kinds of really cool things that you can use in that case. But in every case, I always try and take things back to what would I do in my warehouse? What makes financial sense? And how do I implement this? And what is change management going to look like inside my warehouse as I try and apply one of these new technologies? Because if you don't have buy-in, from all levels, that becomes very difficult. And the more unionized a place feels, the more difficult things are if you just implement things without asking people. So, I always encourage people to think about change management. That piece is that piece is kind of primordial, right?
Absolutely. You've got the technology piece, but you can't lose sight of the human dimension as well.
Right.
And that's critical to the success of those processes. Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, we're shifting on to question number 3. This one really has a real estate focus. So I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives. When we're looking at the various silos within warehousing and fulfillment, how should a company think about them, or how can they avoid moving to a larger building by densifying existing operations or right sizing? And so I'm going to turn that over to you, Nick.
It's a great question, and it's a very difficult decision to make, because there are benefits and people have a desire to kind of stay where they are. There's a huge change management component that affects all the employees and the workforce that's in the building, as well as the vendor base and supplier base that you built up around that. But what I've found in our world is that the opportunity to move to a new building actually involves more of an enhancement of the specs of that building. So when you're moving, you tend to go from a smaller, typically lower clear height building, moving into a higher clear height building that actually reduces the footprint, because you can optimize the storage density, you can optimize the cubic height and utilization of the building, as well as taking the opportunity to rework processing areas. So those are, when we say moving up, it's really moving into a next generation or a higher, taller building. But before that happens, it's a good opportunity to look at what are the benefits of the existing facility, and how can I work together with not just my distribution team or my operations team, but incorporate the purchasing, the planning, the operations, the sales function, Are we doing the right things at the right time to bring the product and move the product in the most efficient manner? Maybe the timing, and people are mandated and working towards different incentives and different mandates. Minimize transportation cost, minimize my purchasing cost, but then they add costs down the line. And that's why we talk, it is a supply chain. There's multiple factors, and it's not just one aspect of the real estate warehouse world. So a lot of questions to be asked, and talking with the industry, talking with different people, getting different perspectives is a great way to help decision makers understand what's in front of them, what they're doing, and are there things that they are walking by and no longer seeing. There's a lot of processes that become part of the furniture. We've all done it this way. So having a fresh set of eyes is a great opportunity to, it's not personal. They're raising questions and trying to find the best solution for that process. So difficult to go through, but very beneficial for decision makers to get that independent perspective.
I've got two kind of points on this note. One of them is, we often get asked on a real estate at a real estate level, what's the shape of the building, right? What does it have to look like? And once you decide, what kind of work that you're going to do, what does that silo have to hold? What work do you have to do? It becomes really easy to figure out, and what volume do we need to do out of here? What size of the building, how many dock doors, and that. But one of the things that really gets missed is the HR side of things. You need to hire people. I can't stress this enough. You need to be in a place where you feel like the flow of people that you have access to is really good. IKEA, for better or worse, in Montreal, they located in a place called Beauharnois, and I don't think anybody knows where Beauharnois is. It's like on the east, on the West Island, like really far off the West Island. Nobody lives there. It's a difficult thing for them to get people to drive way out to Beauharnois, and because of that, you've got a smaller talent pool. Now, God love them, they're smart people, and they've done the math, so they're okay to pay extra for people who are going to come out there, and I don't think they have any real competitors in the furniture business. But I mean, I don't think it's smart for anybody else to put up a warehouse out there. That's just, it's crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah, Rob, if I can jump in, I completely agree with you on the labor front. The different perspective I have on it is that I find that that's a Canadian perspective. We tend to view that, and the whole industry, up and down from warehouse floor associates to supervision to site leadership and decision makers, have a view of centrality and connection and geography, which is very different and into other global factors, right? So when you talk to a supply chain designer, network practitioner from the US or from Europe or from Asia, they have a very different perspective of location versus labor availability. In our world, 15 minutes outside of the GTA, you might as well have gone 3 hours because you've got to bus people in, and it's one's going to come in there for the base rate that you're looking for. If you look at in the US, you can go half an hour outside of a rural area with a small town, and you put a 1 million square foot DC, and you're able to staff it up fully without any problem. It's a very different environment and very different atmosphere in terms of how people look at distribution facilities and labor planning. And that's where, again, the interplay between local boots on the ground and how the facility will actually operate, and how the HR team will bring people in and how you're going to hire is a local decision, and it's a local influence, and important to bring that into the conversation, especially as not only supply chains become more global, decision making is global. And so we have people making decisions on Toronto real estate, on Montreal, on Vancouver, based in Seattle, based in New York, based in Dallas, based in Paris or Tokyo.
No, that's an interesting dynamic that you position, Nick. When I think of two big cities in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto both have significant constraints on location. At the west, you've obviously got the mountain ridge of BC, and in Toronto, it's just the sheer cost of the local market and being on that 401 corridor, access to that highway network system. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes in the coming years, to your point about global supply chain imperatives and how that's affecting things locally, and therefore the real estate decision at the end of the day as well. All right, we are on to our fourth and final question. I'm curious to hear what you both have to say on who is winning the goods to person race and which companies have or won't make it, in your opinion.
Okay, so I walk a lot of trade shows. I talk to a lot of people, and I've been talking with many different goods to person companies. So the GDP space is really crowded. There are a lot of new startups and a lot of different ways of doing this. But two brands come to mind, and then a third system. It used to be that the most popular goods to person was a vertical lift module. And so, you've got Cardex and Modula and a bunch of other players. And that's actually really good unless you need to pick 1,000, different SKUs many times during the day. So that silo is good for very slow movers, or for MRO equipment. But in the goods to person, I would say AutoStore and Exotech are kind of winning. Those are the systems that get put in most often when it's good to person. And then there's a whole slew of different companies out there that are trying to put something together. And I hear lawsuits and fires and bots that work 1 year, and then somebody buys the company, and then it's gone, and then somebody else buys. It's just a mess. I'm still waiting for the dust to settle. But the reality is, if you're trying to solve the goods to person, and please don't just solve that, but that's a really valuable part to solve, because not only does it solve the pick, but it also solves the put away, and it also could resolve the difficulty that most people have with reverse logistics. So it's one of those pieces that if you do it really well, boy, the number of picks per hour really goes up. Typically what we see in rack picking is about a 75 picks per hour per person. And easily, you could be up in the 200 to 300 range in a goods to person system. And then the leverage on top of that is, you've got massively easy put away and great reverse logistics. Unfortunately, I hate to paint all of these companies in the same place, but there are about 40 different companies that I've investigated that are Chinese based, and their products are good, but I just don't know where they're going to be next year. And so it's very difficult. And some of them are really smart and really great. And we've got little projects here and there, and, but do I think it's ready for prime time? Yeah, it's hard to say. For a lot of these companies, not really. I mean, for Exotech, for AutoStore, absolutely ready for prime time, bulletproof, great ways. There are limitations, of course. It's got to fit inside that tote that you're putting the system. Got a picture of one of those up in the background over there. Nick is doing one as well, and they're popular. But like any silo, you can't put everything in it, right? There's a certain profile of product that you put in there, and that's what you put in there because it makes sense to put in there, right? You don't put everything in there. So I will say, yes, it's a great segment of automation. The cautionary tale is don't make it too big. Is it when you build it 10 times bigger, it's not 10 times more useful.
It's probably 10 times more the things to worry about.
Yes.
In terms of performance, optimization, insurance in the space. I know some landlords and asset owners, they say no, and they're reticent because there's been fire of, the robot or the battery behind it. And so you're right. I think being thoughtful, intentional, and walk before you run. With a lot of these technologies. So.
The nicest thing about most of these systems is you can build them in segments. You can build them in phases. And so do the heavy lifting first, like attack the worst SKUs that you have and that business, and it's gonna densify, it's gonna lower your touches, it's gonna make the processes much easier. Your picking profile gets to be used properly. Like there's so many benefits in that, but you don't have to only have that one technology in the entire building, right? That
Right.
doesn't have to be the only arrow in your quiver, right? That's just one of the things that you should be using, right? Because if you solve the pick, now what? Well, you still have to pack it, you still have to ship it, you still had to unload it, you still had to do all those other things. So just keep it all in mind, right? Put it in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that we practice a lot with our clients, is that whole notion of a proof of concept, sort of attacking that low hanging fruit and getting wins with that, and using that as an opportunity then to reinvest in another aspect of your supply chain process. And going back to the human dimension, it's also bringing that team on board in terms of the art of the possible and getting used to that technology, and then being able to expand from there without massive disruption to the business. So I think that's a great point that you shared. Nick, how about you? I'm curious from your perspective on the goods to person race.
I echo a couple of the key points that Rob made, and I really reinforce on them, is that fire suppression is a critical category, and it needs to be planned in at the beginning stages. So it is linked inextricably from the real estate decision making. Like you said, certain landlords have been very explicit in their denial of those systems, but others are open to discussing and to incorporating into the building specifications and expanding the fire suppression capacity to allow for these types of systems. The other part is the fact of there are so many in the space. So as a decision maker and looking at different alternatives, is that solution going to be around next year, let alone 10 years from now? Because you're putting in this type of solution for the next 10 to 15 years. So you need to make sure you're partnering with a company that is going to be around. So AutoStore, Exotech, and we've even seen Dematic, Knapp, and SSI Schaefer have now adapted their unit load technologies into more of a goods to person type system. But the other aspect that I think is very important to consider is that each of these technologies have a unique profile that they answer to. A really good AutoStore system and operation is very different from an Exotech operation, is very different than a unit load shuttle system.
Yep.
So really understanding what moves your business and what your requirements are will help refine the partnerships and the approach of the different solutions. The great thing, like Rob said, is that there are tens of different, 40, 50 different solutions out there that can be looked at. But I think there's a core stable of solid, commercialized, ready, and stable platforms. Will they get bought out? Who knows? There's a lot of money going after these, but if you price yourself out of the market, it's hard to deliver the ROI that operations needs. So that's a challenging space. But AutoStore, Exotech, these are solid systems. Where it matches your use case, you're going to see the results. If it doesn't match your use case, then you've had a good sales process, but you've not delivered on your end result. The other part is, if your business changes, how will the technology adapt? So Rob mentioned the modularity, and these are great ways to start with a system. Don't design it and don't build it for 10 years out. Build it for next year, for the year after. Plan what you're going to do, and as your operation changes, work with and partner with a company that is going to adapt and a system that will work within the guardrails of what your operation truly requires.
I really appreciate those thoughtful insights. And again, going back to that modularity and being thoughtful and intentional in the planning, but making sure that it fits the business, because it's definitely not a one size fits all approach. I think it's quite compelling to your point about finding that solution provider that's going to be there for the long haul, because the investment for this from a resourcing standpoint, from people, the pure costs, the maintenance of it, and the upgrading of it as well. That's all part and parcel to these really strategic decisions. And then under the backdrop against the real estate. So thank you to both of you for those responses. Appreciate your time today. This wraps up our latest Fireside Chat around automation and supply chain with our At the Core series at Encore Advisors. As always, you can turn to our website at encoreadvisors.com. So Rob, Nick, again, thank you for your time and insights, and until next time.
Thank you,
Thank you
Sarah.
very much, Sarah.
Thank you.